Hi everyone, it's Theodora, and I'm here with the founder of Stratagem Artists, Werner, to talk about what he looks for in a singer that he wants to put on his roster, the artist-manager relationship, and some things that you should really start thinking about if you are about to go on the path of finding your representation. Stratagem Artists is a boutique management firm that represents a handful of classical singers and operatic directors. He was also the founder and artistic director of New York Opera Exchange. Justin, thank you so much for being here today.
Of course, thank you for having me.
So I want to talk about what you look for in a singer that you want to bring onto your roster.
There's always two parts to looking at a singer. There's the tangible things that you can grade on a scale, and there are the intangible things. I call it the singer that makes me smile factor. I think a lot of people can judge the tangible things. Is the tone attractive or not? Is the diction correct? Are things in tune? Those are things that a wide variety of artistic professionals are able to discern. For me, from a personal level, because owning my own business, I get to curate my own roster, which is a great privilege to do. I'm really looking for artists that I connect with from a textual level, from a performance standpoint. I'm a big fan of singing actors. I think it's incredibly essential for our industry to move forward from the stand and sing tradition of years past. And I want my singers to tell a story and to be able to fold in their personal experiences to things that were written hundreds of years ago that somehow have stayed in print and stayed relevant.
I am curious, if an artist wants to approach you, what are the best ways for him or her to go about doing that?
Just being a human being, introducing themselves. I do think there's an epidemic of professional relationships being taken to social media far too early. I do try very hard to separate my social media life with my professional life. And some administrators and singers and people of all ages blur that line, which I think is tough. But I think sending an email through, every manager will have their work email on their website. Sending it through the contact portal there. And most importantly, for singers, there's always, second degree separation from every manager. And I think it's much more attractive to me if there's some sort of connection to myself, to Stratagem, to my colleagues. So saying, my friend really enjoys working with you, or this conductor recommended you, or a producer, that's more likely to elicit a more detailed response from me. I will say that Stratagem does respond to every email we get for singer submissions, but if we're getting a to whom it may concern email, that's just going to elicit a shorter response from us. So making it really personal, doing your research before you contact a manager, knowing what their firm is about in a general sense, and being really careful about the materials that you're curating for yourself. Having no typos on a resume, having recordings that are representative, looking like your headshot. I mean, these things sound very common sense wise, but I just know that sometimes those nuances are not taught, and I see especially spelling errors all the time. And that's something where I wouldn't say I write off a singer if there's a spelling mistake, but it definitely is a check minus against them in that whatever imaginary test score we have.
Thank you. Just to dive a little bit deeper into materials, I'm curious, in terms of resume, obviously no spelling mistakes, but what do you expect to see on a resume of a singer who should be thinking about going to an agent?
So is that in terms of what format or what gigs they've had in the past? Because I think it's two separate paths to take, which we can talk about both.
I would love to talk about both because I meant gigs, but I'm very curious now about format.
Sure. So, when Stratagem started a few years ago, I spent a good month and a half picking out a font. I never thought I would spend so much time picking out a font. But it really has become a signature of our business. It matches our logo. It keeps everything consistent. And I think the format we use for our press kit, which is headshot, bio on the first page, resume on the second page, press quotes on the third page, isn't at all out of this world. But I do think just having that uniformity makes a big difference and it looks more professional. And I would want to push young singers to produce a press kit style packet rather than just random materials with different fonts, with different headshots on different papers. It just doesn't look organized. And I think organizing the work in a way where the eye knows where to go, that isn't 9 different colors, that isn't, just confusing in formatting. Opera America has a very simple format that we essentially follow. To each their own, and there are many ways to deliver that information. But I think the last thing you want in an audition is for someone to be deciphering your resume rather than watching you sing. So as much as we want to deliver that information and have them look at your papers later, for me, simple is always better because your audition should be the focus. In terms of what we're looking for in terms of engagements, I think there are many different ways to acquire management. There are many different paths to get there. We have artists on our roster that are just out of young artist programs and are still in young artist programs, and we have singers who come to us, in their mid-30s who have tier 1 opera credits on their resume already. I don't think either way is right or wrong. I do think, again, doing your research, knowing what type of artist that each manager is representing, because it's a totally different scope of what we all focus on, although I think most of the rosters that I really like are quite diverse in that way. And really being able to self-identify what you do well as an artist. Do you specialize in a certain type of repertoire? Do you, if you're a mezzo, are you a pansarel mezzo, or do you do Rossini, or there's so many variables to all the Fox system things. And having an idea of what you want to do rather than having a manager try to figure that out, I think is really essential, because we only help that along. We don't decide that for the singer. I often say no singer is no manager is going to make a singer's career, but I think we just want to be a tool in the toolbox to help singers reach their fullest potential. So yeah, I would say it varies. The old adage, don't get a manager until you have something to manage, is definitely apt. I do think there are companies in this country, especially those that post on Yap Tracker and things of that nature, where managed singers are too expensive in a lot of different situations. And if you can acquire an audition without a manager, why pay someone to get you that audition? So I do think there's an epidemic of singers in this country that don't need managers, that have managers, that are paying retainers, that are just essentially paying for a spot on a website. And the level of quality artist management is not across the board. That's what I'll say.
Interesting, so when I talk to a lot of singers, I know they're concerned about having a manager in part because of sort of the reputation that it brings to you as an artist. You sort of like level up when you have a manager. So do you find that to not necessarily be true?
Yeah, I think there are certain managers that aren't as well respected within our art form as others. And I do think in many ways, by reputation, by the level of artists that you're around on the roster, by just how your manager carries themselves, because essentially it's a two-way street. The artist that we sign is representing Stratagem, and then I'm representing their interest every time I bring their name up in a phone call or a meeting, and I take that relationship really seriously. But there are certain managers, which I won't name names, that I don't think take that relationship as seriously, and I do think it's very easy to level down when you sign with certain managers. It's not necessarily a boon to your career to sit on a website with a couple of recordings and a headshot. So I do think singers just need to be really discerning about whom they sign with, who they're choosing to trust their career. And I just hope that young singers especially can get the education to have the information transparently out there of who's doing what. And, if Stratagem's not the right fit for people, that's fine. We're not the right fit for everyone. But I just want singers to be able to, if we're products on a shelf, to look at all the products and make the right choice. And of course, it's different than normal consumerism, because obviously we have to want to work with a singer as well. But I think we're humans too. A lot of us are former singers. All of us empathize with what singers go through on a regular basis, I hope. And I know from my experiences as a singer, an artistic director, and now a manager, that a lot of the things I think are common sense now are just not in the public sphere and are shied away from a lot. So, I don't think necessarily that management is always a thumbs up. It's always, that level up, as you said. I think that's a really good way to say it. So just do your research.
Thank you. I think that's good to hear as a young artist. I want to take a quick step back and talk about video material or audio material. How important is it that it's professional?
I think singers have many different budget points for these materials. I think investing in the best that you can afford is really important. Headshots, video, audio. Um, you know, you can't make money without spending money. It's true in a lot of ways, and especially for headshots, it's very obvious when an Instagram photo becomes someone's headshot, and it looks like that singer isn't taking their career seriously. For example, if I hear a singer in a competition and I Google them and they don't have a website, I don't think they're serious enough at that point to have a manager. And there can be so many variables to that equation, but honestly, like, managers aren't going to take that extra time to figure that out, especially if it's that sort of one-off, like, oh, maybe I'll check on this person in a couple of years. I often say to singers, we as managers don't have the luxury to have hour-long conversations with every prospective client. Like, it's not realistic, as much as I would love to do that. So I would rather something current than something super high quality. I think I've learned throughout the years to discern voices from all kinds of quality of recordings. Of course, it's easier to discern what we need to hear from something good. And again, there are many varieties of good. But I do think, especially, in our time of COVID, there might be less auditions this fall live in New York. So having up-to-date video is incredibly important, because many companies, if this continues in our current pace, will be casting from video a lot more than they usually do. So, of course, that will never replace live performance. I don't think auditions won't exist in a normal sphere. But I do think having the newest materials you can within your budget is incredibly important.
I'm going to take a step forward now and assume that you do have an agent. What should a singer expect as far as the relationship?
I communicate with my singers in a certain way. I know managers who do it in a similar way. I know managers who do it in a totally different way. And neither way is right or wrong. For me, I try to imagine what I'd want as a singer who was managed and deliver that transparency and communication to my artists. I think you should expect your manager to know what repertoire you sing, to know where you fit on their roster, to be in pretty consistent communication with you, to value your sort of non-singer life just as much as your singer life, because I think that gets lost in the shuffle a lot. And I think your manager should be part of your long-term plan. I don't think anyone signs with a manager expecting to only work with them for a year. It's not like anyone walks into these relationships knowing or thinking it's going to, I'll be over in a year and I'll move on. When I sign a client, I expect to work with them for the rest of their career. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, but that's my expectation. I expect to grow with the artist. I expect to, first and foremost, follow up with their own contacts and then fold them into our own. It's a collaboration, and I think our tagline is artist-driven collaboration, which I take really seriously. We as a firm have not missed a main stage audition in New York in 3 years. We have attended every single one. I think that's incredibly important to have a scale of what an audition at 60% is versus what at 100% is, what arias are being chosen, what's not. Because I think without that very first-hand experience, we're not in a position to advise. We're not in a position to give any sort of feedback unless you're hearing a singer on a consistent basis. And that being said, we can't be at every performance. We can't, travel around the world 7 times to hit every major performance. But at Stratagem, we like to be the big ones. And I also think that if a manager does not see their singer on stage in a full production with the orchestra, you can't really get a full idea of how the voice reacts to that. I will say I heard 2 sopranos that I've been working with this year pre-COVID for the first time in main stage roles with orchestra, and it's totally changed my opinion of what the future holds, what repertoire they should be doing, how they act on stage. It's been eye-opening for me. And also for both of them, the repertoire, I think, fit more in their wheelhouse than I expected. So it's never a full 90-degree pivot, but it informs every decision that I think the singer and their toolbox should make. And the manager should not be your full toolbox. You should talk to your coach and talk to your teacher and your mentors and have your team. But I always wanted Stratagem for us to be part of the team, for us to communicate with those people, rather than superseding or replacing anyone. I think that's what you should expect. I think there are certain industry standards to how much people should pay in commissions, whether or not you should pay a retainer. There are things that I have really strong opinions on that are not industry standard. But I think at its core, the manager should be really transparent with the singer about their business practices and to let the singer decide if that's what they want or not. Because I know singers who pay retainers really happily. I would never charge one. I think it's honestly morally apprehensible, but to each their own.
Would you mind going into a little bit more detail about what the industry standards are if you are negotiating with a manager or an agent, what to expect?
Yeah, so opera is usually 10%. That varies a little. And then for concert work, there's a range between 15 and 20, depending on the firm, depending on if they differ on semi-stage versus concert, whether it's defined via length of engagement or the type of engagement. So those are sort of the general numbers. I know people on the lower end of that. I know people on the higher end of that. I will say that Stratagem charges 10% for opera and 15% for concert. And we actually define concert by length of time rather than the type of engagement. So if a singer is doing a fully staged opera, but it's at an orchestra, like we had a singer do Meredith Monk's Atlas at LA Phil. Some companies would charge that as a concert engagement because it's with the Phil. But we feel it's fairer to have it be defined by an amount of time rather than like, oh, maybe you were memorized, maybe you weren't. Oh, were there music stand? There's just so many variables to that. So we thought a very cut and dry amount of time would be the smoothest way to do that. I think a singer should expect, if there are expenses incurred, to have them told. I think for a manager's perspective, we should expect commissions to be paid on time, for singers to be prepared, to have communication the other way. I think a big epidemic in our industry is companies reaching out to singers directly, trying to supersede us. And it's really important to me that even if it's a gig that we know we're not going to take, that I have it on my calendar, that I have it noted, so we can reach out to those people later. And I have had really great success with my roster, whom I love. They're all fabulous humans. But we've really established a rapport of a really open channel of communication, which is, I think, first and foremost what you need out of your management team.
For singers who want to sing in the US but also in Europe, I know that in the States there's often a non-compete clause in their contract with the manager, whereas it's a little bit more open in Europe, and I was wondering how you could talk to your agent about that.
So I think, first of all, just looking at your contract to see what that situation is, because we, for example, are your exclusive management unless you would like to explore the option of European or global management. And then we would just be exclusive within North America. We're very enthusiastic about singers reaching out to European management because that's not our expertise. I don't feel like we can really be efficient in that world without an office, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So I really want to concentrate our resources, even traveling to things like domestically. Um, so I think just as you read the contracts, asking those questions, do you have presence in Europe? If you don't, do you have contacts in Europe for managers that you work with all the time, where it would be a seamless relationship? Because many of my American colleagues, including us, have certain European managers that we work with on a regular basis that we just refer people to. So there are companies in the US that cover both markets. I think sometimes it's efficient, sometimes it's not. But I think, again, that just sort of flows into the research part. Like, if you see a manager who claims to have a European presence, but then their roster doesn't have anyone working in Europe, that's probably a red flag. And, I will say for younger singers, just ask your colleagues. Like, what I say to every singer who sings for us, go ask people on my roster what they think. Go ask administrators that I work with. And I know many of my colleagues do the same thing, because that's how you're going to know about our work. That's how you're going to get a real opinion. I can say, oh, I have 40 people at the Met. Like, that's just not true. But I mean, some of the more nuanced, like, what is the communication like? The intangibles, like I talked about earlier. I think it's a lot easier to get from a colleague than any sort of, fledgling professional relationship. Because of course there's a little maneuvering there.
Is there anything you want young singers to know about looking for an agent or a manager?
I think just do your research. There are options out there. I think most importantly, I want young singers to know that, I'm someone who has an undergraduate degree in vocal performance, an artist diploma in vocal performance. I wore a lot of different hats in the industry. And for a minute there, my mid-20s, I thought, oh, I wasted all my time learning opera, learning technique, and any other job I'll go into is a waste. Like, I've just wasted that time. But I mean, to be honest, I would not be where I am without the training I have, without the experiences. And it's definitely not a failure. I feel like I'm contributing more to the art form now than I ever have. And I definitely, from a personal standpoint, gain the most enjoyment, and I'm most passionate about this job. So I just, whenever I go to a university or a young artist program, there are so many other jobs in opera besides being a singer. Now, I would never tell a singer to quit, like, no matter what the situation was. But I just really want singers to know that there's options out there, not only with who your voice teacher is, who your coach is, who your manager is, and there's pros and cons to everyone, but that singers just have more options moving forward. And there are many ways to build a career. And I think the linear sort of, you get out of grad school, you go to a young artist program, and then you have this magical main stage career, like, that's just not realistic in a lot of cases, especially for larger voices, which need more time to develop. I think options as a general note is what I want them to know.
So I'm at the point of the interview where I always ask the same questions. So you were a singer. What advice do you have to your younger self? And I'm sure it might be similar to what you may have just told us.
What advice would I have for my younger self? I think I sort of figured it out, which I was really lucky to have amazing mentorship around me, to have a partner who has always been supportive of my endeavors, no matter how little money it brought in at first. I've had singers since I was 22, starting my opera company, who have trusted me with their careers, which I really appreciate, and I would not be here without it. I guess just stay the course. You'll figure it out. There were ups and downs, but I don't really think I would change any experiences or advise my younger self to do it differently, because I do think every experience I had really informed what I want the manager-singer relationship to look like.
Awesome. And any parting words to the young artists of today?
Do your research.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, no, great. I appreciate it.
For those of you at home who want to read more about Stratagem Artists, you can visit their website, www.stratagemartists.com, and you can check them out on Facebook and Instagram, and their handle is Stratagem Artists. I'm Theodora, and we've been in the wings with Justin Werner. Join us next time as we talk with Jordan Weatherston Pitts about his experience with Young Artist programs, YAC, and the Soloist Coalition. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my page, and if you have questions you'd like me to ask in the future, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I hope you can join us next time.